Hey everyone, today I'm going to be sewing the new Brooklyn from Sonia Estep Designs. It is a button-up dolman style shirt with long and short sleeves as well as a tank top option. It has a curved hem or straight hem as well as an optional tie front. I have been making a ton of these. They are so cute and addicting to make. It's definitely a year-round staple piece. It is also breastfeeding friendly because of the buttons. Today I'm going to be sewing a long sleeve, straight hem, tie front option. And just a note about the buttonholes, don't be afraid to try them. I was so intimidated to try buttonholes and buttons that it took me forever, and when I finally did, it was not as scary as I thought. If you don't want to do buttons though, you can always do snaps. I did snaps on one of my versions. I will include pictures of the different options that I've done just so you can see some of the choices. Alright, I think that's it, so let's get started. Okay, I have my pattern cut out already, so I'm going to start by sewing the front pieces to the back at the shoulder seams. Just going to lay out my back bodice, and then I am going to match up the front piece at the shoulder seams. Going to make sure the arm matches up. Go ahead and pin that together, right sides together. And then we'll take our other front bodice piece and do the same thing with the other shoulder. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and take this over to my serger. You can also use a sewing machine. You would want to do a stretch stitch, so a zigzag, a triple stitch, a lightning bolt stitch. Just a stretch stitch on your sewing machine will work as well. We're going to attach our sleeves. So we're going to take our bodice, front to one side, back to the other side, and open up that sleeve piece. And lay our sleeve right sides together. Go ahead and pin that in place. Same thing for our other side. Okay, we'll go ahead and sew those sleeves to the bodice. up, so I'm going to take you over to my cutting table so we can see a little bit better. So I have my bodice laid out here, back this way, front this way, and we're going to go ahead and pin our side seams going from the sleeve down the body of the shirt. So I'm going to fold the sleeve over, right sides together, matching the raw edges, and pinning that up. Same thing for the other side. Starting with the sleeve, flip it right sides together, pin along the sleeve, putting the raw edges together. Take that to the sewing machine and sew that up. But before we do that, I'm also going to prep my facing pieces and my band pieces. So we have our facing pieces. I like to lay them out. And then flip them over, right sides together, and pin that because we're going to sew that short edge, and this short edge as well. And then our band, we have two band pieces. I have my notch marked, so the two ends with the notch should be on the same side, and then you sew this short end together. And instead of cutting the notch, I mark mine with a marker. But so the notches are on the same end, the shorter end, and then you're going to sew this short end together. Alright, so let me go over to my machine so we can do that. Alright, I'm going to start on my sewing machine, sewing our facing and band pieces together. Short ends, short notched ends of the bands together. Onto our shirt side seams. step is to add our facing, so I'm going to go back to the cutting table for that. Okay, I have my shirt laid out with the bottom up. I'm going to lay my facing on top of it, right sides together. I start by matching up at the seam where the front and back bodice meet on both sides. And then I'm going to go ahead and pin down and around across the center and down and around the other side. And sew that on. Now that that's attached, we're going to go ahead and flip that to the wrong side of the shirt and pin it in place. And after we've gone and done along the whole facing, we will top stitch it in place. Our facing turned to the wrong side and pinned in place, I'm going to take this over to my cover stitch to top stitch it. You can use your regular sewing machine. You could do a long straight stitch. You could do a zigzag stitch. You could use a twin needle on your regular machine, but I have a cover stitch, so that's what I'm going to use. Okay, I'm at my cover stitch. Find the end of my hem here. And I'm just going to go ahead and top stitch it, the facing in place. everything top stitched into place, I'm going to head over to my cutting table so that we can pin on our band. Alright, I have my shirt top neckband up here, and I have my neckband piece. I'm going to start finding the seam of my neckband. I'm going to open that up, and then fold it wrong sides together, and I'm going to pin that seam to the center back of my bodice. Okay, then next I'm going to find where I marked the notch on my neckband. Instead of cutting the notch, I just marked it with a marker. So I'm going to take that mark and line it up with the notch on the front bodice neckline. Pin that in place. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Once I have those 3 pins in, then I am going to stretch the neckband to fit the neckline in between the notches. Stretched and pinned between the 2 notches, we're going to do the rest of the band down the front bodice neckline. To the bottom, I'm going to fold that in so we have a nice clean finish. Pin that bottom in place. And then we will do the same thing down the other side. Go sew that on. Before I use my serger, I'm going to go ahead and baste just the ends in place so that they stay lined up nicely instead of shifting while I'm serging. always like to check to make sure I got all 3 layers, especially if I'm working with a slippery or curly fabric. I just want to go along the band, make sure I got all 3 layers along the whole thing. Alright, looks good. Now I am going to take a safety pin and weave in my serger tails before I go ahead and top stitch the band down. Take this over to my cover stitch and top stitch that band down. And I'm top stitching the seam to the bodice of the shirt. Ready for buttons. Okay, so I am going to start by pinning from the bottom up, overlapping the band where our buttons and buttonholes will go. Pinned up here, and the shirt does come with a buttonhole guide. Everyone's preference is different, so I would suggest use the buttonhole placement guide as a starting point. But like I said, because everyone's different, everyone's a little bit different in shape, has a different preference about how high or how low they want it to start. I would recommend trying the shirt on and see where you want your top button placed, and then decide how many buttons you want. And then you could use this as a guide, or you could vary from it. I've done both. So it's just kind of a personal preference, so I suggest trying it on and starting by where you want your top button and then placing them based on that. So that is what I am going to do. Okay, so I've tried my shirt on and I've marked where I want to put my top button. So I am going to lay my button out, and then I know I want 4 buttons. So I'm going to kind of just lay them to get a spacing that I like. And get pretty good spacing. Okay, a little bit further apart. Alright, and then I'm going to go ahead and measure to make sure they're even. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to mark the bottom of the button, because that's when I do my buttonholes, that's the way my machine works. So I'm going to mark where I want the bottom of the buttonhole to start. Okay, then we're going to go over to my sewing machine and sew our buttonholes. Okay, before we can do our buttons, we need to put a little interfacing behind where we're going to put our buttonholes. So I've cut out rectangles of interfacing and I've placed them on the back side of my band where each of my buttonholes are going to go. Go ahead and iron that on. Okay, now we are all set to go ahead and make our buttons. Okay, so everyone's machine is a little bit different. I have a Husqvarna Viking Ruby. I have a buttonhole foot that I plug into the machine, and then I measure the buttonhole and input the size on the machine, and it makes the buttonhole the correct size. So I actually just had trouble getting my buttonhole to work, and it's because I didn't have it all the way plugged in. So make sure if you have a machine that's similar, make sure you actually get that plugged in tightly. Let's try again. So I've lined up to the mark where I marked at the bottom of the button. There we go, problem solved. So we have a buttonhole, and like I said, I am still a fairly beginner at buttonholes and buttons, so you can see it's not perfectly centered on my band. That's okay, it's still going to function. Nobody's going to know except you. It's okay to make mistakes. So this time I'm going to line up with that spot again. I'm going to make sure I go a little further in so I can get it centered this time. That one was a little bit better. Still not exactly centered, but again, it is okay. It'll still function just fine. So I've done all 4 of my buttonholes. I'm going to go ahead and cut my threads. And I use a seam ripper to open up my buttonholes. Grab my seam ripper here. So I just put it, make sure you can see what I'm doing in the bottom. Poke that through and then carefully slide up. To the top and and open that buttonhole. Now we need to go mark where we're going to place our buttons. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pin my band in place again. Just laying it on top of each other without stretching it. I'm going to pin in between my buttonholes, not actually over my buttonholes. Okay, so now that I have that lined up, I am going to take a marker. I'm going to open up the buttonhole and right in the center just put a little dot as a guide for where I want to place my button. Now we can go back to our sewing machine and attach our buttons. I'm going to take out the pins. Remove my buttonhole foot. Select the button option on my machine. And I actually just a few months ago decided to learn how to attach buttons using my sewing machine instead of by hand, and I very much regret not learning it sooner. It's very easy. You just have to be careful not to break your needle is really the only thing that can go wrong. So I have my button lined up where I put my red dot. I'm going to go ahead and drop my presser foot, and I am going to check to make sure my needle is lined up. See, I'm a little bit off here. Okay. Lift that back up, and then I have a mirror button, so it'll mirror the needle to the other side. Oh, lift the presser foot up. Okay, and then I can wheel it down and see it's going to hit the button, so I know it needs to be a little bit wider. Alright, I think that's probably good. A little bit too wide. Okay, that one's right. That one's good. Alright, I think we're ready to go. And I just go very slowly, pressing the pedal slowly. It just goes back and forth. Thread, and voila, an attached button. Way easier than sewing by hand. threads, and then all we'll have left to do is hem our sleeves. So I'm just going to press my sleeves up a 1/2 inch. Over to my cover stitch machine. Alright, I'm just going to go ahead and top stitch my sleeve hem. Pretty. I'll add a finished picture for you at the end here. Thank you so much for watching today. I hope you had fun making your Brooklyn. If you have any questions about it at all, let me know down in the comments, and if you'd like to follow along, hit the subscribe button. Thank you.